200 million years ago, it wasn't alone. It was part of a supercontinent called Gondwana, fused together with South America, Africa, India, and Australia. Imagine standing on what would one day become the South Pole and looking around at a single unbroken landmass stretching in every direction. No oceans separating continents, just one colossal piece of Earth's crust. Even further back, around 150 million years ago, Antarctica was part of an even larger supercontinent called Pangaea. Everything was connected. Every piece of land you can name today was jammed together in one enormous puzzle. Antarctica was already the furthest point south, but it hadn't moved over the pole yet. It was warmer, wetter, alive. Then Pangaea started to break apart. Slowly, over millions of years, the pieces drifted. South America peeled away, Africa separated, India shot north toward Asia. Australia slid off to the east. Antarctica was left behind, isolated, slowly creeping toward the bottom of the world. Around 35 million years ago, Antarctica as we know it today finally formed, and that's when everything changed. Because here's what nobody tells you. For the vast majority of Antarctica's existence, it was green. During the Cretaceous era, 80 million years ago, Antarctica had arrived at the South Pole, but there was still no ice cap. The entire continent was semi-tropical. Forests covered the land. Not the kind of trees you'd recognize today. Most modern trees are flowering plants that had only just begun to evolve. These were massive ferns and conifers, some as tall as buildings, blanketing a landscape that would one day be entombed in ice. The climate back then was radically different. Earth had no polar ice caps at all. Most regions were hotter and drier than they are now. But Antarctica, sitting at the southern extreme, offered something unusual. A lush, temperate environment. Rivers carved through the forests. Animals moved through the undergrowth. Life thrived in a place that would eventually become the most inhospitable continent on the planet. So what happened? How does a tropical forest turn into 2 miles of solid ice? The answer lies in a process so gradual that no single generation of life would have noticed it happening. As the continents continued to drift, ocean currents shifted. Antarctica became completely isolated, surrounded by the Southern Ocean. Cold water began circulating around it in an unbroken loop, a phenomenon called the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. This current acted like a barrier, preventing warmer water from the north from reaching the continent. Temperatures dropped, snow began to accumulate, at first just during the winter, then year-round. The snow didn't melt. It piled up layer after layer, compressing under its own weight into ice. Glaciers formed. They grew. They spread. And over millions of years they swallowed everything. The forests disappeared. The rivers froze. The animals either migrated or went extinct. Antarctica transformed into the frozen desert it is today. Ice core data confirms that Antarctica has been locked in ice for over 10 million years. That's long before humans walked the Earth. Long before our ancestors even existed. The ice has been there so long that we think of it as permanent, as if Antarctica has always been this way. But 10 million years is nothing compared to the hundreds of millions of years Antarctica spent as something completely different. And yet, for most of human history, nobody even knew Antarctica existed. Ancient Greek philosophers theorized about a landmass in the far south. They called it Terra Australis, the southern land, a mysterious continent they believed must exist to balance the weight of the northern continents. But it was just a theory. A guess. Nobody had seen it. Nobody had been there. Then, centuries later, explorers started pushing further south than anyone had gone before. And what they found was stranger, more hostile, and more fascinating than anyone had imagined. The story of how humans discovered Antarctica, what they thought they'd find there, and what they actually encountered is where things get truly bizarre. In 1773, Captain James Cook crossed the Antarctic Circle. first human to do it. He sailed through freezing waters, dodged icebergs the size of cathedrals, and discovered islands nobody knew existed. But he never saw the continent itself. He came within 150 miles of the mainland and had no idea. The ice was so thick, so impenetrable, that he turned back convinced that if land existed down there, no one would ever reach it. He was wrong. In January 1820, 3 separate expeditions spotted Antarctica within days of each other. Russian explorer Thaddeus von Bellingshausen reported seeing an ice shore of extreme height. British naval officer Edward Bransfield saw high mountains covered in snow. Nobody could agree on who saw it first, but it didn't matter. The continent was real, and the race to explore it had begun. But what's fascinating is what happened before any European ever got there. Polynesian oral tradition tells a different story. Around 650 CE, a navigator named Uite Rangiora sailed south from New Zealand into frozen waters. The oral histories describe a place of bitter cold and white rocks that grew out of the sea. They might have reached Antarctic sea ice. They might have even seen the continent itself during an unusually warm summer when the ice pack opened up. We'll never know for certain, but it's possible that Polynesians discovered Antarctica over 1,000 years before Europeans did. Fast forward to the early 1900s. This is when things get dramatic. The so-called heroic age of Antarctic exploration. Men in wooden ships racing to plant flags at the South Pole. In 1902, Robert Falcon Scott, Ernest Shackleton, and Edward Wilson pushed further south than anyone in recorded history, reaching a point on the Ross Ice Shelf that set a new record. But the South Pole itself remained untouched. December 14, 1911. Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen and 4 men arrived at the South Pole after a 57-day trek across 1,800 miles of ice. They were the first. Scott's British expedition arrived 34 days later, devastated to find Amundsen's flag already planted. Scott and his entire team died on the return journey. Their frozen bodies were found months later, along with Scott's diary documenting their final days. Shackleton tried something even more ambitious. He wanted to cross the entire continent. His ship, the Endurance, was crushed by sea ice in the Weddell Sea before they even reached land. What followed was one of the greatest survival stories in history. Shackleton and his crew escaped to Elephant Island in tiny lifeboats. Then Shackleton sailed 800 miles across the most violent ocean on Earth in a 22-foot boat to get help. Every single member of his crew survived. The heroic age ended in 1922 with Shackleton's death. By then, the main routes were mapped. The South Pole was conquered. But the continent still held secrets. 1929. Admiral Richard Byrd flew over the South Pole. First time much of Antarctica had been seen from the air. Then came World War II, and suddenly Antarctica wasn't just about exploration anymore. It became strategic. In 1938, Nazi Germany sent an expedition to Queen Maud Land. They called their claim New Swabia. Conspiracy theories erupted almost immediately. Secret bases, hidden fortresses, underground cities. The truth? They were there for a month. They surveyed the coast for whaling operations. Declassified documents prove it. But the myths persisted. After the war, Admiral Byrd returned with Operation High Jump. 4,700 men, 13 ships, 19 airplanes, the largest Antarctic expedition ever mounted. Conspiracy theorists claimed it was a military assault on secret Nazi bases. Reality? It was a training mission for potential Arctic warfare against the Soviet Union. They mapped vast stretches of unexplored territory and collected scientific data. That's it, but here's what actually matters. In 1959, 12 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty. It came into effect in 1961 and did something unprecedented. It banned military activity. It banned mining. It banned territorial claims. Antarctica became the only continent on Earth dedicated entirely to peace and science. Over 50 countries have joined since then, and the science happening there now is staggering. In 2025, researchers discovered an entire ecosystem beneath the ice after an iceberg broke away. 6 new species. Life thriving in conditions we thought were impossible. Scientists found 6-million-year-old ice in the Allen Hills, the oldest ice ever directly dated, with air bubbles trapped inside that reveal what Earth's atmosphere was like when the planet was much warmer. In 2021, they drilled through 1,600 feet of ice expecting to find a subsurface river. They found it, but they also found it teeming with tiny amphipods, life existing where no one thought to look. Beneath Pine Island Glacier, researchers discovered a hidden granite mass nearly 100 kilometers wide. Pink granite boulders sitting on mountaintops finally made sense. They'd been a mystery for decades. Antarctica keeps revealing itself in layers. A tropical forest buried under 2 miles of ice. Ancient rock formed 3 billion years ago. Life in rivers we can't see. The continent isn't finished surprising us. Every expedition uncovers something that changes what we thought we knew. The frozen desert at the bottom of the world is still teaching us what's possible when we're willing to look beneath the surface. And maybe that's the real lesson Antarctica offers. Not just what happened millions of years ago, not just stories of frozen explorers and secret expeditions. It's that permanence is an illusion. The ice that seems eternal has only been there for a fraction of the continent's existence. The forests that once covered it are gone. The warm rivers that carved through ancient rock vanished long before humans existed. Everything changes given enough time. Even a frozen wasteland at the bottom of the world was once something completely different. The ice will melt eventually. The continents will drift again. Antarctica will transform into something new, something we can't imagine. And billions of years from now, whatever exists in our place will dig through the layers we leave behind and wonder what kind of world we lived in. The ice remembers everything. It's just waiting for someone to listen.